Hello, welcome to the video where I explain the content of my thesis. My thesis title is an analysis of neutralization and rationalization behaviors in digital pirates in Indonesia. First thing we're going to look at is crime in society. How do criminals forgive themselves? This is a form of intrapersonal communication, or we could also describe this as our inner voice. We're going to look at digital piracy, where people steal things or download things or stream things from the internet. And we're going to be doing it in the context of reality as a subjective and socio-cultural construct. So what this means is that everyone has their own reality and that everyone builds their own understanding of the world. We're also going to be asking, does the environment play any role in changing who we are as a person? Does it change our behaviors? So first, every city, every country has crime, so the fact that I'm basing this study in Indonesia does not mean that I'm blaming Indonesia as a criminal culture. It's simply the country I live in. So I wanted to see the attitudes of people who lived here towards a certain kind of crime. Here we see someone committing graffiti. The owner may or may not want their wall graffitied, but that is life in urban spaces nowadays. Here we see gang violence and domestic violence. We're going to be looking at these ideas through the prism of neutralization theory, which was originally proposed back in 1957 by Sykes and Matza. It has since been followed up by numerous empirical and qualitative studies right up until 2018. So the theory is, although it's old, the theory is still very valid. So going back to the pickpocket stealing the wallet, the pickpocket might say, he is rich, he won't miss the money. Or he might say, I had no choice, I wasn't born rich, like some lucky people. In the first statement, he is making a denial of injury. A denial of injury means that he's saying nobody actually got hurt. So nothing really happened. And in the second, he is saying he wasn't responsible. It was his environment that pushed him and it was inevitable. Next we can see the graffiti artist and he will claim that the wall is still functional, the wall still works as a wall, but now it's artistic. So what he has done here is called denial of injury. In the next we have gang violence again, and the people in the crime might say, nobody messes with my homeboys. What this means here is that he knows, or they know, that the crime that they are committing is wrong, but they're doing it because of their membership of a peer group that requires them to hold to a particular code. In this case, protecting their patch, their territory, against their perceived enemies. So they might commit an appeal to higher authorities where they're saying that their gang membership is more important than the societal contract. For the domestic violence, we all too often hear the claim of, she had it coming. Here, there's a denial of victim. Now the victim is obvious, but what we're doing here is stripping them of their victimhood status. By taking that away, there no longer is a victim as such, just an equal who deserved what was coming to them. Now this is sick and twisted logic and I don't hold by it, but this is an example of a neutralization used by somebody in a fairly extreme crime. And here are the original 5 neutralization techniques as proposed by Sykes and Matza. We didn't see the condemn the condemners, which is in the left-hand side. Condemn the condemners is where we say the people who are telling us what to do or giving us the rules, that they are corrupt. So why shouldn't we be? This might be a claim of not obeying the law here in Indonesia because the police are perceived to be corrupt themselves, whether or not that's true. Then in the thesis we look at copyright and the nature of copyright, and we can see in the first chapter it's established that the US intellectual property rights group have expressed that countries such as America are losing massive amounts of money to illegal downloading compared with sales of physical media. And this is in particular, they're losing that money to developing nations like Indonesia, who prefer to download the content than buy the original content. So all of these things that we can download for free or stream for free, we may not perceive them as being a violation of a law, but nonetheless somebody somewhere is losing out on money. And one of the kind of neutralizations that we can employ when we're illegally downloading is that it doesn't really hurt anybody. There's no victim. The victim is just off stage. We can't see them. They're in another country. Just because we can't hear them, it doesn't mean that there isn't a victim out there. And we're going to be framing all this in the context of Indonesia, and we're going to be looking at piracy in Indonesia, and in particular piracy in Jakarta. Also in the first section, the introduction, it's pointed out that this problem is so bad that the American president is aware of places in Indonesia, such as Mangadoa, where copyright piracy is rife. So if we think of this as just being a local problem or a local phenomenon, it's not. It's made its way all the way up to the president of the USA's office desk. So this folder that's sitting there is telling him about something that's happening in the city that we live in, which I find quite startling. The police do conduct busts now and again, but they're not efficient, they're not effective, and everybody living in Indonesian society is aware that it's only a 5-minute walk to your nearest pasar or market to pick up the latest illegal DVDs. With that being said, how does that context affect people who grow up in a world where copyright theft has become a defaulted norm? It's become something that everyone thinks is natural, and everyone thinks is, I have access to DVDs for 5,000 rupiah as opposed to paying the full face value for them, like in lots of Western countries. So the assignment for this video asks us to describe the benefits of the research on the development of communication science and for the benefit of communication practices. Give an example of its practical application, if any. Well, as we can see, what we're looking into here, digital piracy, is a crime, regardless of how it's perceived in Indonesian society. So it's a good idea for the police to be able to understand how people think regarding piracy, and then they can act accordingly. But if they don't know what they're up against, it can be very much a case of they make up a rule and then wonder if that rule works for anybody. Also, interpersonal communication is a process that all human beings undergo. It's really important for us to understand what goes on inside our own internal conversations before we can start thinking then about interpersonal communications. They're based on the framework of how we talk to ourselves within ourselves. And I think it's a really good idea to look at the problem of copyright theft in the context of a country where everything isn't the way it should be and only some people are committing crimes. It's much more useful to look at copyright theft in a country where copyright is actually being stolen. The assignment also asks for any weaknesses in the research, and I come up with 3 main things that I think are a problem. Since I don't speak the local language very well, then it can be difficult for me to get to the bottom of the issues. If somebody was able to better explain themselves in Bahasa Indonesia, am I perhaps hampering their communication abilities by conducting it in English? I have conducted it in an international university, but I still think it would be more effective in Bahasa Indonesia. I also think that my sample group might be too rich, but what this can also do is exemplify the fact that if rich people are doing this when they don't have to, then those people who are below them on the social strata, if they're also following suit, then maybe the sample group isn't too rich after all. And in the literature review, there's a lack of qualitative research in Indonesia to draw on. So creating a framework, therefore, was difficult. I'm asked to name my paradigm, my research approach, and my main theories used. The paradigm is constructivist. It's qualitative research using semi-structured interviews, and it's based on the theories of Sykes and Matza, Clockers, Miner, and Coleman. If you have any questions regarding my research, please drop them into the discussion forum. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Goodbye.